10 o'clock, the BBC News now on BBC One with Hugh Edwards.
Tonight at 10, we're at Westminster, where David Cameron has told MPs that leaving the EU will be difficult, but the referendum result has to be accepted. It was his first address to Parliament since the UK voted to leave. He said the UK's attitude to the wider world would not change.
As we proceed with implementing this decision and facing the challenges that it will undoubtedly bring, I believe we should hold fast to a vision of Britain that wants to be respected abroad, tolerant at home, engaged in the world.
25, please.
On the financial markets, the pound fell to a 31-year low against the dollar, despite the Chancellor's efforts to reassure traders.
It will not be plain sailing in the days ahead. But let me be clear, you should not underestimate our resolve.
We'll have the latest on the fallout from the referendum, as police chiefs say there's been a rise in reports of hate crime in recent days. Also tonight. A turbulent day for Labour. Jeremy Corbyn stands firm, despite dozens of frontbenchers rejecting his leadership.
Don't let the media divide us. Don't let those people who wish us ill divide us. Stay together, strong and united for the kind of world we want to live in. Thank you very much.
And coming up in Sports Day on BBC News, we'll have reaction to England's last 16 match against Iceland, including the thoughts of manager Roy Hodgson.
Good evening from Westminster, where the Prime Minister has addressed Parliament for the first time since last week's referendum. David Cameron told MPs that leaving the European Union would be difficult, but the voters' verdict had to be accepted and the process of implementing the decision had to begin. Mr Cameron stressed the need to bring the country together, and he promised that police would have the resources to deal with the rise in hate crime that's been reported since the referendum. First tonight, our political editor, Laura Koonsberg.
Regrets. Might he have a few? After a referendum he never thought he'd lose, on the way to give a statement he never thought he'd have to make. David Cameron won't make that many more journeys like this in the Prime Ministerial Jag.
Statement, the Prime Minister.
But one of his last statements coincided with the first day of a Labour MP. With that party in total turmoil, the PM, although he's lost, couldn't resist a gag.
Let me welcome the new member for Tooting to her place. I think I'd advise her to keep her mobile phone on. She might be in the shadow cabinet by the end of the day. And I thought I was having a bad day.
But what's happened really isn't a laughing matter.
The British people have voted to leave the European Union. It was not the result I wanted, nor the outcome that I believe is best for the country I love. But there can be no doubt about the result. Of course, I don't take back what I said about the risks. It is going to be difficult, but I am clear, and the Cabinet agreed this morning, that the decision must be accepted and the process of implementing the decision in the best possible way must now begin.
But formal talks will only start once he's been replaced. He condemned an apparent rise in racist abuse since the result and urged the country to come together after this bitter campaign.
I believe we should hold fast to a vision of Britain that wants to be respected abroad, tolerant at home, engaged in the world, and working with our international partners to advance the prosperity and security of our nation for generations to come. I have fought for these things every day of my political life. I will continue to do so, and I commend this statement to the House.
But the Labour leader, under huge pressure himself, condemned the campaign.
It's the issue of trust. And the tenor in the referendum campaign was disheartening. Half-truths and untruths were told, many of which key Leave figures spent the weekend distancing themselves from.
And with Scottish voters having chosen to stay in, the SNP warned they won't put up with the results.
We are a European country and we will stay a European country. And if that means we have to have an independence referendum to protect Scotland's place, then so be it.
Boris Johnson didn't show. There was, though, some parading of the victory, but concern too.
Voters of the United Kingdom have demonstrated the value of that great principle, the principle of democracy, for which people fought and died.
He is leaving a dangerous political vacuum. Can I urge him to look at much broader arrangements to build a wider consensus?
The referendum has changed everything for the Tories. Once the heir apparent appearing for the first time this morning, George Osborne almost seemed to find it hard to meet the eye.
I fully accept the result of the referendum and will do everything I can to make it work for Britain. There have been questions about the future of the Conservative Party, and I will address my role within that in the coming days.
The Commons wasn't much of a guide to what will happen next. That's because it's the next Prime Minister's priorities that will set the terms. The Tories must now decide who'll make it to number 10. Could this relatively new face, Stephen Crabb, be the one?
This isn't just about party unity now, it's about national unity. Did it anger you when you...
So the race to Downing Street is certainly on.
Will you be throwing your hat in the ring for leadership?
The Home Secretary is almost as certain to want this to be her new home. One of those who persuaded you to choose out won't run. He'll back him instead. Boris Johnson, right now the favourite, but there's a long way to go.
And it's clear now that Project Fear is over.
But Project We're Not Quite Sure What Next is underway. The future Tory leader, the next Prime Minister, will move in here by September the 2nd. Who that will be is strangely not the biggest question that we face. Laura Kunsberg, BBC News, Westminster.
Well, despite an attempt by the Chancellor to reassure the financial markets in the wake of the referendum, sterling dropped to its lowest level against the dollar for over 30 years. The UK's credit rating has been downgraded by 2 ratings agencies today. One of them, S&P, said that the referendum result could lead to a deterioration of the UK's economic performance. But George Osborne insisted that the UK was ready to face the future from a position of strength and that there were robust contingency plans in place. Our economics editor, Kamal Ahmed, has been following the day's events.
The Chancellor emerged after 3 days of silence to insist it wasn't a told-you-so moment. It was a time for reassurance. George Osborne said the UK economy was strong and that with the pound falling and share prices tumbling, the government was ready to do whatever it takes to stabilise the markets.
It will not be plain sailing in the days ahead. But let me be clear, you should not underestimate our resolve. We were prepared for the unexpected, and we are equipped for whatever happens.
But surely this was the man who was predicting economic chaos, who said 2 weeks ago Britain would need an emergency budget, plans which have now been shelved.
Can you tell us a little bit about your position? Did you consider resigning, and if not, why not?
Well, first of all, I've got a very important job to do, which is, as Chancellor, to speak to international investors, to speak to my counterparts, to do what I can to stabilise the British economy. That's what people would expect of their Chancellor, and that is what I am 100% focused on and will continue to be focused on.
It has been another day of turmoil as fears of Brexit seized the markets. The pound sank by 3.4% to $1.32, its lowest for 30 years. That's good for exports, bad for holidaymakers and inflation as imports become more costly. The FTSE 250 index of major companies in Britain fell by 7% as investors worried about uncertainty. And just look at the value of those banking stocks. RBS, which we still own a chunk of, down 15%, and Barclays down 18%. These share prices are seen as a bellwether of the state of the economy.
And tonight, more concern for the city as one of the world's leading credit agencies, S&P, downgraded its rating of the UK's governance and economic performance.
It's now much harder to actually foresee how would governments react to certain financial stresses than it has been before. So we really reassessed our view of the institutional capacity of the UK government to react to a financial crisis if and when they arise.
There are different ways to write this story, and here's one man who feels much more positive. Lord Mervyn King, the former governor of the Bank of England, accused the government of peddling fear, treating people like idiots, saying warnings of gloom had been overdone.
Markets move up, markets move down. We don't yet know where they will find their level, and the whole aspect of volatility is there's a trial and error process going on before markets discover what the right level of stock markets and exchange rates actually are. So what we need is a bit of calm now. There's no reason for any of us to panic.
Together, my colleagues in the government.
Investors are watching the Chancellor closely, looking for signs that someone, somewhere, has a plan. Tomorrow, business leaders are set to express their concerns. Tensions in the market are not going anywhere soon. Kamal Ahmed, BBC News.
Well, here at Westminster, Labour MPs are to hold a secret ballot tomorrow on a motion of no confidence in their leader, Jeremy Corbyn. He's now lost the support of almost 40 members of his senior team who've resigned their positions, saying they don't believe that he can lead the party to power. And he was accused by the former Labour Minister, Alan Johnson, of working against the Remain campaign. Mr Corbyn has let it be known tonight that he will be staying in the job, as our Deputy Political Editor, John Pienaar, reports.
What keeps Jeremy Corbyn going? They do. His army of followers, as hostile to most Labour MPs as he is. Spear carriers in the civil war he's now determined to fight and win at all costs.
Don't let those people who wish us ill divide us. Stay together, strong and united for the kind of world we want to live in. Thank you very much.
Today, most of his shadow cabinet team voted with their feet. More left than stayed. Some fear this could split Labour for good, including one tipped as a possible leadership contender, though she's not saying.
Look, I don't think today's about any potential future leadership contest. I think Jeremy really, in the best interests of the party, needs to stand down. And we don't serve our party or the interests of some of the poorest people in our country and in our local communities by being a Labour Party that can't win an election.
You're finding this very difficult?
Yeah. But I feel that I've served in the best way I can, and today I had to go.
Angela, thank you very much. There's pain across the party. Rising stars, previously loyal, have risen in revolt too.
I think we need to go and have the leadership election that has now become inevitable, that none of us wanted and that, frankly, in my view, we shouldn't be having. And I think we need to use this time to unite and to look outwards to the country. And I think the only place that I can realistically do that from is from the backbenches.
It feels that the collision between the people who are seeking to get rid of Jeremy Corbyn and the people who are trying to stick in there in Jeremy Corbyn's team risks breaking the Labour Party.
If the Labour family does break up, some on the leader's side are saying good riddance to the rebels. He's sure he's on the right side.
Our country is divided, and the country will thank neither the benches in front of me nor those behind for indulging in internal factioning manoeuvring at this time. We have...
The bitter blame game just gets worse. Alan Johnson, who campaigned for a vote to stay in the EU, has now accused his leader of failing to help the Remainers nearly enough. He's even claimed it felt as if Team Corbyn was working against the rest of the party. After a bruising private meeting with Jeremy Corbyn, Labour MPs have agreed to hold a vote of no confidence, which he could lose. A leadership challenge seems inevitable, but his most loyal supporters here in Parliament Square believe he'll win that contest. And as one member of Team Corbyn put it, the rebel MPs could see their worst nightmares come true. More power for ordinary members, rebel MPs sacked as parliamentary candidates. What's at stake? Labour's identity at a defining moment for the party. John Pienaar, BBC News, Westminster.
Now, in Germany, Chancellor Merkel says there can be no question of any informal talks on the path out of the EU until the UK triggers Article 50 of the Treaty of Lisbon. That is the formal mechanism for delivering a British exit. And she said that the UK might need a certain amount of time to analyse things. EU leaders will hold a summit meeting tomorrow. Our Europe editor, Katja Adler, reports from Berlin.
The weight of recent European history hangs heavy in Berlin. Reminders wherever you look of 2 world wars, a brutal Cold One, and a pledge, never again, thanks in large part to the European Union.
It's because of its turbulent recent history that Germany has been a passionate member of the EU right from the start. It's about far more than trade. For For Germany and many other countries, peace, security and weighty symbolism go to the heart of the European project. They don't intend to give up on it.
Berlin, along with the rest of Europe, went into a spin on Friday after the UK voted to leave. There were talks other EU countries could follow with their own referendum. Damage limitation was Angela Merkel's priority number one, and so the French and Italian leaders came to town. A united front to say, sad though it was, Britain should start talks to go as soon as possible. We can't wait endlessly, said Angela Merkel, and she added while they were waiting, there'd be no informal talks with Britain about a future trade agreement. The French president warned of economic and political consequences if the UK drags its feet. But he insisted,
Europe is Europe. Europe is strong. Europe is solid. Europe is a project that has to continue, even if it needs a few changes.
The meeting here in Berlin today between the leaders of Germany, France and Italy was as much about image as content. The photo op an intentional signal that at its core the EU remains united in purpose and unflustered by the British vote. But of course they are concerned.
As are their allies. The US Secretary of State flew to Brussels and London today.
I personally will regret that Britain is not going to be at that table when there is a US-EU dialogue, but I have no doubt that Britain is going to be weighing in with us and critically involved with us on every single issue.
So, all aboard for a new EU and a UK that stands outside it, with a warning. Exact course as yet unknown.
And of course, all eyes now turn to Brussels. David Cameron will be there tomorrow at a meeting of EU leaders. They'll want to know all sorts of details and deadlines and answers from him that he's really not in a position to give. The UK has voted out. The EU wants to get on with it. No one's quite sure how this goes on for the moment. They are joined, however, uncomfortably and awkwardly.
Katja, thank you very much. Katja Adler there for us in Berlin. Back here at Westminster, I'm joined by our political editor, Laura Kunsberg, and our economics editor, Kamal Ahmed. Kamal, can I start with you? A question that lots of viewers have been asking during the day. Are we heading for some kind of economic crisis?
Well, there's certainly a sense, Hugh, among investors, those are the people that put the money into British businesses, that create the jobs, that the politicians are fiddling whilst the markets burn. Just as you say, though, Hugh, how significant is this, and could it lead to a full-blown economic crisis, a real meltdown in the markets? It's certainly significant. Let's put some historical context around those market figures today. A 7% fall in the markets is greater than the fall in 2008, the financial crisis. It's greater than the fall in 1992, the exchange rate mechanism crisis, when Britain was ejected from the forerunner to the single currency. You have to go right back to 1987 to find falls of this magnitude, and that was the year we had the hurricane, which more or less brought the British economy to a halt. So definitely significant. Also on the global markets, there has been a fall in stock markets around the world. So this is affecting world confidence. But I spoke to S&P tonight. They don't believe there will be a recession in the UK, despite some saying there could be. Why is that? Because, frankly, we've learnt the lessons of 2008. The Bank of England, the Treasury, know more than they did in 2008 how to fix crises. They say that money will be available, the banks will be supported. Final point, uncertainty, though, is stalking the markets. There's the uncertainty of Britain in the European Union. What is that relationship? There's the uncertainty of who's the next Prime Minister, what is the economic policies, what are they going to be, and the uncertainty of will we have a general election. One thing the market hates, uncertainty. That's the big problem.
Let's talk about the statement in the House today, Laura. The Prime Minister clearly focusing on the Brexit circumstances. To what extent is it fair to say that the party is probably more focused on the leadership crisis.
Well, I'm afraid they are. You know, Westminster is sort of captured by this post-referendum howl round, and the Chancellor and the Prime Minister sought to calm nerves today, but there's not very much in terms of clear leadership coming out from them, and lo and behold, guess what? Politicians are focusing on the next person who's going to be the boss. So in the Tory party, I can tell you tonight that Jeremy Hunt, the Health Secretary, is considering whether or not he will put himself forward as a candidate. He's got a big piece in the Daily Telegraph tomorrow outlining some of his ideas. Clearly the front runners are Boris Johnson and Theresa May, the Home Secretary. But, you know, this is already a tense race and people are already vying internally, their supporters, and I'm told that some MPs have actually started complaining because they feel that government whips are trying to influence them to back Theresa May, not Boris Johnson. So already bad tempers, only a couple of days into this race.
Talking of bad tempers, given some of the exchanges we heard today, Labour and Mr Corbyn with his own challenge.
We did see in Westminster tonight astonishing evidence of the division. Just up there in Parliament Square, demonstrators, 1,000 or so, we're not sure of the exact number, there in defiant support of Mr Corbyn. He spoke, John McDonnell, the Shadow Chancellor, spoke, while inside, Labour MPs furiously, one after the other, some in anger and some in sorrow, calling for Mr Corbyn to go, just saying that his time is up. And look, I expect there are going to be more resignations from the Labour front bench tomorrow, and maybe also voices coming out from around the country saying that it really is time for him to go. Jeremy Corbyn's team say he's absolutely not going anywhere, but I suspect tomorrow we might start to see the sort of fraying of that support that he's had amongst the membership. And it's that support amongst the membership that got him there, and that's what he believes will keep him in a job. But it's likely by this time tomorrow night we might be in a full-on leadership contest for Labour too. One party searching for a new leader, the other party with a leader whose authority has gone missing.
We'll talk again later. Laura, thanks very much. Kamal, thank you too. Laura Kuenssberg and Kamal Ahmed then. Well, that seems like a good moment for us to turn to have a look at some of the day's other news. And the England manager, Roy Hodgson, has resigned in the past few minutes after England suffered a humiliating defeat to Iceland at the Euro 2016 Championships. Our sports editor Dan Rowan watched the 2-1 loss in Nice. He's just sent us this report.
Enjoying it while they can. Nice hadn't been on England's original itinerary, but having veered off course by failing to win their group, the French Riviera beckoned. A decade since their team's last knockout win, the fans desperate to see the tide finally turn. While England are underachievers, they're up for the first time this tournament. England's #1 at fault, 2-1 down and barely able to believe what was happening. Beyond repair, and manager Roy Hodgson will pay with his job. Out of another tournament, but in a way possibly the greatest calamity in English football history. 2 years ago I watched England get knocked out of the World Cup in Brazil in 5 days flat and thought it couldn't get any worse. I was wrong. People talk about the 1950 World Cup defeat to the United States, but arguably this plumbs new depths. Let's put this into context for a moment. English football has the richest league in the world, the Premier League. The manager, Roy Hodgson, the best paid manager here at Euro 2016. The FA, one of the richest football organisations in the world, a wealth of talent to choose from. They've just been beaten by the smallest country in terms of population, just 300,000, remember, to ever reach a major tournament. Iceland playing in their first ever major competition. Half of the year they can't even play football. They only have one Premier League player and no professional league, but they were simply too good for an abject England team, and unsurprisingly Roy Hodgson has just resigned in the last few minutes. He's had 4 years with this side but has achieved very little. Here's what he had to say.
The contract was always up after the Euros, so now is the time for someone else to oversee the progress of this young, hungry and extremely talented group of players. They've been fantastic, and they've done everything that's been asked of them.
Well, after that World Cup debacle 2 years ago, England tried to create a new team. Lots of young players came into the side. That's what makes this so disappointing. And in same old England failings, really, the FA will have to go back to the drawing board, try and find a manager and try and work out what went wrong. Is it the problem that we all talk about, the fact there's no winter break? Is it the fact that the Premier League has too few homegrown players in it? Is it the coaching quality? These are the kind of questions that the FA will have to answer in the coming days.
Dan, thanks very much once again. Dan Rowan there with the latest for us on England's performance there in Nice. Let's have a look at some of the day's other news now then. 2 children remain in a serious condition in hospital after yesterday's roller coaster crash at a theme park in Motherwell. A 12-year-old boy has chest, abdominal and leg injuries, and an 11-year-old boy suffered serious arm and hand injuries. In total, 6 others remain in hospital. The M&D park remains closed while police and health and safety officials are investigating. The UN Refugee Agency says it will be some time before civilians who fled the fighting in the Iraqi city of Fallujah can return to their homes. Their exodus from the city is continuing, with tens of thousands of people now in temporary camps in the desert in sweltering heat. The Iraqi government says its forces cleared the remaining Islamic State fighters from Fallujah yesterday, but airstrikes are still being carried out against the militants there. Let's talk about some tennis, and a new British star has emerged on the first day of Wimbledon. Marcus Willis from Slough, ranked outside the top 700 and playing his first time at the tournament, has made it to the second round. The 25-year-old beat the 53rd ranked Rikardas Berankis of Lithuania. Joe Wilson reports now from the All England club.
Marcus Willis was here for the first time, and he was here for a good time. World number 772 with just £220 of prize money this year. He hit with hope. Willis had almost given up playing tennis as a career. Now he was 2 sets up against the world number 53, and his mates were singing soul music. Shoes off if you love Willis, for no obvious reason. But sometimes sport revels in the surreal. Not only did Willis win in straight sets, but he next plays Roger Federer and will earn £50,000 even if he loses.
It's a big blur. It's a great opportunity. It's what I've dreamed of since I was young. So yeah, it's a bit weird. I'm sure it will hit me at some stage, but it hasn't at the moment. I'm just loving every minute.
Marcus Willis offers tennis lessons in Warwick for £30 an hour. Grab him while you can. He may not be that cheap for long. Joe Wilson, BBC News, Wimbledon.
Well, here at Westminster, there's some more now on the fallout from the referendum. And as we heard a little earlier, David Cameron has condemned reported incidents of abuse and hatred directed at immigrants since that referendum result. The Prime Minister said the government would not tolerate intolerance and underlined that other EU nationals would face no immediate change to their rights of residency. Police have been placed on alert for any rise in hate crime, as our special correspondent Ed Thomas reports now from Leeds.
Immigration. For decades it has shaped this part of Leeds. But right now, the latest to arrive, the Eastern Europeans, are facing a test like never before.
Keep telling, why are you still here? Why are you not coming back to your own country?
Vilius is from Latvia. He says every day after the referendum, he's faced abuse.
Do you feel under threat?
At the moment, yes, because I don't know what's going to be later on. That's very simple.
And when people shout that at you to get out, what do you say?
Why I should get out?
And there is tension.
This is my street, yeah, obviously. We had no Romanians, Polish people here before.
Where are they now?
We've got them here. We've got them end of the street.
Consider Rubel, a second-generation immigrant, now frustrated at Europeans arriving in the place he calls home.
I work, pay taxes. I got married abroad myself, but I'm paying the way to get my missus here, you know. I pay, you know. I'm in a situation like, and I can just see these lot just coming over and messing things up for me.
And immigration, was that your big issue?
Yeah.
And do you want it to stop now?
I want it to stop.
And many here feel like they can now speak out.
They've got their own country as well, and not just flood of Britain.
Take Wayne. He voted out after years of concern over immigration.
Just close the barrier, stop, because it's too much.
Do you want the migrants to go home now?
I want them to go as soon as possible, really.
To go back to where they come from?
To go back to where they come from. There's more of a reason to say it now.
After the Brexit vote?
Yep.
It's important to put this into perspective. We've heard of dozens of cases of European migrants facing abuse. But this is a sensitive time, and many people in places like this are worried about what happens next. EU migrants have been told they have a right to stay, but that message isn't getting through to everyone. Renata left Lithuania 4 months ago, a single parent looking for work.
It's going to be different. We've been for many years in the EU, so
We're just all guessing what's next. Everyone is really scared.
And then we find Lee.
I'm a nationalist. I'm for this country.
Outside a Polish shop, proud to call himself a fascist and wanting to talk.
Just take your country back. Take our country back. It's not racism. They're just coming across too much.
Once that vote happened, what were your thoughts and feelings?
A sense of relief.
You felt relieved after the Brexit vote?
Yes.
There are extreme voices, and for some European migrants, of fear, fed by uncertainty of what will come. Ed Thomas, BBC News, Leeds.
Well, as Ed was saying there, away from Westminster, there is concern among many voters about what happens next and the impact of leaving the EU on jobs and the economy. That's certainly one concern. There are many, however, who say they're delighted with the outcome. We heard some of them there. And the pace of events. James Landale has been talking to the people of Canvey Island in Essex, one of the areas with the strongest support for leave.
In Canvey Island, Britain's trade with Europe and elsewhere is hard to miss. Yet this is a corner of the South Essex coast where the EU flag no longer flies, where almost 3/4 of people voted to leave.
Out is out, and that's it. The people have spoken. People are always going to feel a bit nervous after about all the changes, but at the end of the day, you know, what's done is done. And if we were to go back on that and start questioning the result, then democracy's dead.
We're Great Britain, we're England. We've been doing this for hundreds of years. I can't see us coming out of Europe causing any problems.
Here, with their East End traditions and pie shops, there's little regret at the vote for Brexit and the fact that it won't happen overnight.
I don't know, I think it's going to take a long time for change to happen, but if it changes to how it was 20 years ago, then that's fairly good.
If it was me, I'd come out tomorrow.
That's not going to happen though, is it?
No, it ain't going to happen, my son. It ain't going to happen.
But amid the optimism, a note of anxiety. Paul Masters, a local businessman, voted leave, but...
It could be 5 years before we see the good side, you know. Not tomorrow, it's not going to happen tomorrow, it's not going to happen today. You know, it's at least 5 years before, if it is a good thing, and I'm still not sure it is a good thing, I'm still a little bit...
So you're having second thoughts?
Not so much second thoughts, but just think I should have given it more thought.
Down the road at the Island Cafe, there was some concern that the Leave campaign was appearing to row back on its promises.
Are you confident that we're going to come out, immigration will stop, all that money they promised to the NHS, are you confident that's going to get spent?
Should do. If they don't, they're going to make themselves look stupid, aren't they? You know, so if they don't do what they say, well, what's the point of saying it?
If Britain was divided over whether to be in or out of the EU, it appears equally divided over what should happen next. Some want Brexit fast, others fear the bumpy road ahead. The pressure on the government is both to handle that uncertainty and deliver on Leave's promises. Expectations are running high.
For now, though, many in Canvey Island are just content that their voice has finally been heard. James Landale, BBC News, Essex.
Time for a quick word again with our political editor, Laura Kuensberg. So David Cameron, tomorrow, on his way to Brussels. What's that likely to be like?
Well, I think it's going to be pretty awkward, isn't it? I mean, don't forget that not so long ago, just in February and March, David Cameron was sweating to try to get European leaders to agree a new deal for the UK. They did, eventually, under some duress, with significant political effort and a lot of man-hours and energy. And then tomorrow he has to go and tell them, you know that deal that I asked you all for help with? You know that deal that I promised would get the backing of the British people? Well, you know what? It didn't. My political calculation was wrong. That's not just awkward for him politically in terms of the UK, but of course for European leaders, as Katia was suggesting earlier. The likely exit of the UK is a significant risk for the whole of the European Union. But of course, however David Cameron finds that meeting tomorrow, the big question is, who will be taking over those negotiations after he leaves? However awkward it is, however pleased they are or not to see him, he will not be the Prime Minister when these critical negotiations about our relationship with the European Union and our place in the world are concluded. That is the big picture, not necessarily who's going to win the power struggles that are already underway here in Westminster, but what is our relationship with the rest of the EU going to look like? David Cameron will not be the person to answer that, but tomorrow we will get the first real taste of what European leaders have to say back to the British political establishment. It might not be pretty.
OK, Laura, once again, thanks very much. Laura Kuenssberg there. And that's it from us at Westminster tonight. Newsnight is already underway on BBC Two. It'll be 11 o'clock in Scotland. Here on BBC One, it's time for the news where you are. From all of us at Westminster, have a good night.